Are you a fan of in-depth conversations on a wide variety of subjects? Then you need to head out on the open highway. I'm Eric Erickson. I bring my crazy career and interests in a variety of subjects to the show, and since I seem to know, well, a little bit about everything, it's just enough to get me into trouble. The open highway is like going on a road trip and meeting all different sorts of people. It's that old idea of sitting at that diner counter, having coffee, and talking with folks with completely different backgrounds. One episode might be a political operative, the next a professional wrestler, and the next a philosopher. Just having good old-fashioned conversation. If it's interesting to me, I'm sure it'll be interesting to you too. The Open Highway. New episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. Get them wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Today we'll be talking about Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and cringe comedy. And we'll be talking about Andropause. This is Doctor versus Comedian. I'm Dr. Asif Doja, and this is the Doctor of Laughs.
Not a real doctor.
Ali Hassan. Every episode I pick a topic for Ali from comedy and entertainment and question him about it. Then Ali picks a topic from medicine and health and grills me on that topic. Today, in honor of the new season of Curb Your Enthusiasm coming out recently on HBO, we'll discuss Larry David and cringe comedy. And we've discussed menopause in the past with Dr. Jen Gunter. Today we'll be discussing Andropause. And Ali, just before we get started, everything okay with your not a real doctor? You sounded somewhat depressed. I don't know. Is everything okay?
No, I'm so sad to not be a doctor sometimes, you know? I know that's what the people demand of me. I know there's a lot of listeners we have who think, I wish the other guy was the doctor. That would be way better. You don't wish that. Nobody has ever said that. Nobody's been like, I wish that guy. They may be like, I wish that guy knew what he was talking about. That's a possibility, but not... They don't want me in an official capacity, I don't imagine. Yeah, I'm just trying different voices on my Not a Real Doctor. I'm trying to attack it from a different, right? I'm going a highfalutin British next episode. Be prepared. Not a real doctor. We'll see what happens. Is that highfalutin enough?
I don't know. That's like, you sound like the Little Britain guys, you know?
Yes, exactly.
You know, that's who you
exactly.
sounded like.
That's what I'm going for.
So
you saw a nice movie? You were in the Marvel universe?
Yes, I saw it on Disney Plus. I'm still not ready to go with my family to a movie theater, but Shang-Chi and the Legend of the...
Okay.
Oh, actually, hold on. No. I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say. I got it. I watched the movie. It's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. That's what you were going to say, right? I got it. I got it.
No.
No, that's how you say it.
I love a good self-censorship. Shang-Chi. This is like when people go, I had a nice bowl of pho, and someone goes, actually, it's pronounced pho. And, you know what I mean? Like, I get there's place for all those people in this world, and I'm glad you got... What I was going to tell you is, like, the theaters, 400-seat theaters have like 30 people in them. It's a pretty inherently socially distant exercise these days, I have to tell you. I mean, I think you'd be surprised at how... I've been twice on a Tuesday in the last 18 months. Just coincidentally, that's just how it went. And both times it was like not well attended. I'm not sure how Hollywood's
I've gone by myself. Sorry. Well, I mean, I have friends. I went with my friend. Well, okay. My alleged friend. His name is, Shang-Chi.
Microphone Shang-Chi. His name is Mike Rophone. You know, his father's a doctor, Dr. Rophone.
Anyway, no, I did go. I went to like the, those VIP cinemas where they serve you food and stuff like that. So that was even more spaced out. So I was comfortable with that. But, not all my kids are vaccinated because of age, by the way, not because of their personal choice.
Your notorious 10-year-old anti-vaxxer child.
So I'm sure we will eventually when something really good comes up. But anyway, I knew that Shang-Chi was coming out in a few months. So we saw it. Yeah, we saw it on Disney Plus, movie night in the basement. And so you haven't seen it, have you, Ali?
I haven't. We will before. I think this is like great Christmas viewing. You know, we're adding up all these various things. This will be the holiday. Whether we achieve those goals or not remains to be seen, but this is on the Christmas list. My schedule really frees up after early December, or I would say by mid-December. It's going to be a lot of free time, and that's when we're going to get HBO back. We don't have HBO. We took a break.
Put it on hold. Okay, right.
We put it on hold, and I was on set with my new friend, my pal Aurora Brown, and she was desperate to talk about season 3 of Succession. Desperate. Every time I walked by her, she was asking a different person, are you watching Succession? Are you watching? No? And it's like, it's a cast and crew. Like, the crew has been working 14-hour days for 2 months. Nobody had seen anything on that cast. And they're, you know, when they go home, they certainly don't want to watch more TV. They've been working in TV. And I was like, soon, December. And she's like, oh my God, you can't. Oh gosh, she was so frustrated not to talk about it. But yeah, there's a few things coming out that I'm excited to watch, and Shang-Chi will be one of them.
Christmas holiday plan. So that's good. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to kind of watch these with the family, like these kind of family movies, Marvel movies. And there's always, you know, this is just an aside, there's always a bit too much swearing in these movies. I don't know why. Like, why do you have to drop like an S word and you know, I don't know.
Did you an S word?
Well, I don't want to swear on this podcast because then I'm doing the same problem, right? I'm like,
no, I know. You know,
this
is funny. I'll tell you why I'm laughing at. You have to say an S word. It's supremely comical to me because what I've been watching with my 6-year-old. And yes, this is highly inappropriate. I'm aware of that. But he wanted to watch that Leafs documentary on Amazon. And I don't know if you know how NHL coaches and players talk. I'm not exaggerating when I say every third to fourth word is an F-bomb. Like, completely unnecessary. Even you do well, you do poorly. He's just talking about let's back check. It's like, let's effing back check. That's the way you effing score, boys. That's what I'm effing talking about. This is the coach. And every time my wife and I look at each other like, my son needs his Toronto Maple Leafs propaganda. And there was no telling him, like, you're not old enough to watch something about your favorite team. But it's crazy. Like, if my son starts swearing profusely tomorrow, we'll be like, yeah, that makes sense. It's almost a miracle he doesn't.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can just blame it solely and only on that Leafs documentary.
On the Toronto Maple Leafs organization.
Not you at all.
Entirely.
Anyway.
No.
So, back to Shang-Chi, which I'm pronouncing properly. I didn't know the pronunciation until I saw it in the movie, and they very blatantly explain that's how you pronounce it. So this movie, other than the swearing, which is not the problem with this movie, that's in like every superhero movie, they have to swear sometimes. Okay, so here's my review of this movie. It is an excellent Marvel movie, one of the best Marvel movies, with the most boring main character I've ever seen in a Marvel movie. And it's so sad because I like Simu Liu. He's, you know, a Canadian guy, was on Kim's Convenience.
His story, his rise, is one of the greatest stories. For people who don't know Simu, please look him up and see what this guy has been able to accomplish in this last decade of work. It's amazing.
He was a business guy, martial artist. He did martial arts when he was younger, did business at Western University, my med school alma mater. And then he quit business and decided to try acting, did stunt work. Right. And then did this. So anyway, it's not his fault. He didn't write the movie. But I just find his character is so boring, and I'm trying to not ruin parts of the movie for it. But there's a part where the villain explains the motivation, and basically Simu Liu's character, Shang-Chi, just kind of like disagrees and says, no, you're wrong. You're delusional. And again, I don't want to ruin the movie for people who haven't seen it, but what the motivation of the villain is so specific and related to what Simu Liu should have a motivation for as well, Shang-Chi's character, that it just doesn't make any sense. And it's so bland. I really couldn't believe it. Everyone else in this movie is excellent. Awkwafina's in it. And then, you know, two of the greatest Hong Kong kind of movie stars ever. Tony Leung and Michelle Yeoh. These guys are just legends.
Legends, sure.
You know, and they're excellent. They're such good actors. And there's also a very famous Academy Award nominated actor who appears in it, who I won't spoil because it's a bit of a surprise. So everybody's great in the movie. It's very well directed. It's very well written, except for the main character. So it's such a funny thing, but I think it's worth seeing because of the depiction of, you know, we have Asian representation as big movie stars and action heroes.
Representation is huge, and you opened your conversation about this by saying it's one of the best Marvel movies you've ever seen. So clearly, the lead character's character isn't so bad that it takes away
no
from the movie. So that's
bland.
great.
It's just bland, and you know, and they paid such attention to getting Asian representation right. So a person who appears in it is Menger Zhang, who plays Zhu Ziling in the movie, and you'll see who that person is later, but she kicks butt in the movie. And she had a red streak in her hair. And they filmed they were a month into filming, and she was just doing some research, and she's like, oh, there's a trope now that Asian women in movies can only be a badass, in quotation marks, if they have like colored hair, like blue hair, red hair, you know, a dyed white hair, and then you're like, oh, that's probably not true. And then you look, you know, in all like action movies and things like that, you know, obviously not ones made in China and in Asia, but and it's like a trope. Like if you just have black hair, like most Asian people do naturally, then you're just a meek kind of subservient person, and it's only, you know, you color your hair, now you're this badass. And so she went to the director, Destin Daniel Cretton, and said, you know, I think we should change this. And he looked it up and did his own research. He's like, yeah, no, I agree. And they went to Marvel and they said, you know, what we have to do is, you know, change your hair going forward for the rest of filming and go back with visual effects and correct all the stuff. And Marvel said, yep.
Oh, I love it.
No problem.
I love it. What a feather in their cap for Marvel.
Yeah, it's a great story. So anyway, I suggest you see it? Absolutely. And I'm hoping maybe they can expand more on Shang-Chi's character going forward.
Great.
So I guess this the worst segue ever is going from a bland character to someone who I don't think you can call bland.
You cannot.
We're going to be talking about Larry David, who plays Larry David in Curb Your Enthusiasm.
It's the greatest blending of actual person and actor that you've ever seen. It's like you don't know where the lines. Every article written about Larry David is like, you know, people go and meet him for coffee and Larry David does Larry David. So it's like, oh, this is not a character. This is just him. It's the worst acting job ever in a sense because he's just being himself. There is no acting. And they say that acting is actually being. You shouldn't act. So maybe it's the greatest job.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that what they say?
They do.
Okay. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about today. So been watching the new season of Curb, and just, you know, I love that show. It's one of my favorites. It's not doesn't get up to Seinfeld levels because it's like this taking the character of George and Larry David's influence on Seinfeld and just blowing it up. And it's been going on. I think it's the 11th season now, and it hasn't come out every year, as we know. There've been like up to 6-year gaps between seasons, but I'm really liking it. But then it got me thinking about this whole idea of cringe comedy. And I don't know, I'm not sure I really thought about cringe comedy before George Costanza and then Larry David during Curb Your Enthusiasm, but it's like such a part of our society now. So I thought we could talk maybe about cringe comedy as a whole, and then we could talk about our thoughts about Larry David and
Sure. Well, I would venture to say that you did think about cringe comedy a lot, but never knew you were thinking about something with that name. You just didn't have a title on it, right? You didn't have a label on it. For me, knowing what you've watched, shows that you've watched, I will tell you that you've definitely gone deep into the world of cringe comedy. And for people who don't know what we're talking about when we say cringe comedy, and I'm going to tell you in a second that Larry David himself does not feel like he's cringe comedy, which is a hilarious fact about Larry David. But cringe comedy, for me, the introduction, and maybe for you as well, came with 2 British shows. Do you know what those 2 shows are?
2 British shows. The Office. British Office?
The Office for sure. Ricky Gervais' character, David Brent, was a master of cringe. You watched him and you were like, no, please don't do that. Please. Oh my God, he's doing it, right? This is like a big thing. And then there was another, he's one of the OGs. Most of his life has been mastering this idea of cringe and social transgressions and discomfort and all this kind of stuff.
I'm blanking on the second person, and I feel like I'm in like a test in medical school, and I'm like getting
you
it
are
wrong.
in a test.
Okay.
Bing bong, bing bong. Who is Sacha Baron Cohen?
Of course.
And the Ali G show.
Ali G
the
show,
Ali G show.
Yeah.
Man, that was like, we didn't know it was called cringe comedy at the time, but you knew you were having like a reaction deep in your stomach about like, oh my God, you just asked like a premier, you just asked a finance minister one of the most inappropriate questions, and you're watching them squirm and you're watching him waiting for an honest answer. And you're like, how did he even get this interview? How did he interview like a president or a future president, like, Donald Trumps of the world, billionaires? High earners and high status people in the world. Somehow he got to sit down with all of them and make them feel incredibly uncomfortable and make us feel uncomfortable in the process. So that guy's one of the OGs. And a lot of people say Larry Sanders Show and Arrested Development or cringe. I don't remember cringing as much with those. Sometimes with Larry because of who he was, but there was a lot of laughs in there as well. There was a ton of laughs in there as well. Whereas with, the Ali G show, I don't know how much, I think I was laughing, but I was also equally just like pained to be watching things. But other shows that operate in this cringe space, there's one Canadian guy, if you don't know Nathan Fielder, I encourage you to look up Nathan Fielder. Nathan for you is, that guy's a master of cringe for sure. And people will say that Girls, Lena Dunham's show, was definitely in that space. Veep, which makes sense, right? With that seems to be Julia Louis-Dreyfus's roots. Extras, which again, Ricky Gervais doing what he does best, and of course everything else that Borat, obviously, right, and everything that Sacha Baron Cohen does almost, and yeah.
By the way, as an aside, I just watched a preview for there's a new comedy, and that's not a comedy. There's a new show on Disney Plus that's coming out called Willow, which is based on the movie Willow. Do you remember Willow from in the 80s? Mad Mardigan and Warwick Davis is in it. And they had a little preview for it where it's Warwick Davis interviewing the cast of the show. But I don't know if you ever seen Life's Too Short with Warwick Davis, which was a show created by Ricky Gervais for Warwick Davis, and where Warwick Davis plays like an annoying version of himself, like a very similar to like a David Brent or Extras kind of person, like just a super annoying, like doesn't really realize how annoying and cringy he is, and it's him acting like that, interviewing his castmates, and like it is quite funny. I'm sure that's not what the show is going to be about. It's because he's playing the character Willow, right? So it was just a really funny idea to do it in this kind of cringe comedy way. Anyway, people should check that out if they're online.
Good recommendation.
I don't know if people ever go online, but
yeah, I think they might. Yeah, so it's an interesting. Now, when I say interesting, there are theorists who've talked about this. There's this guy, he's a humor theorist, Noel Carroll. I mean, he's much more than that. He's film studies, a philosopher. And God, if you thought that, breaking comedy down and explaining a joke was boring, humor theory is possibly the worst thing you can do to comedy. I mean, you can literally hear people stop listening if we go too far into what a humor theorist does. But, you know, the idea of cringe comedy is that you're either the type of person who finds something amusing or you find, it annoying. But once you find something amusing, you cannot find it annoying. This is this incongruity theory, right? In relation to being annoyed, those two things are completely separate. And so, if you find Larry David and Curb Your Enthusiasm annoying, it's just not going to get you, right? You're out. You're out. So it's a very interesting show in that way. It's just quite divisive. And while I don't find it annoying, I found a 2-show maximum. I found this out because I tried. I could never do a Curb Your Enthusiasm marathon. And I didn't know this about myself. I tried. I was at my friend Q's house. We were just sort of, recovering from a weekend of whatever it was, doing what we did. And, I was upstairs in his house. He was downstairs, and I just had, his TV to myself. And I'm like, I'm going to watch Curb all afternoon. This is going to be a wonderful hungover afternoon. And I got 2 shows, and that was it. And I remember trying it again, and 2 shows. I was like, it's a lot. It's a lot on my my psyche, maybe, my soul. I'm not even sure. But I have a limit with Curb. But I enjoy it. But I'm like, number 3 will no longer be enjoyable. You do not concur with that?
No, I agree. I find I have to watch it. Sometimes I cover my eyes when I'm watching it, or I literally say out loud, "Oh no." Again, it's a TV show, but it's just his attitude, because it's like when say you're with a bunch of people and you're meeting your friends. Say I'm meeting some of your friends, right? And you get into a disagreement with a friend, like a friendly disagreement about something, right? Usually in the back of your head, one person will say, well, listen, I'm Ali's friend, Asif's Ali's friend. I don't really want to cause any more tension. I'll just drop it, right? Or I'm not going to keep pushing them and get upset about it. And I mean, I know people like this, Ali, who don't drop it and keep pushing forward. But Larry David is such an extreme example of this, that he will keep going, and especially at minor things, right? That's the other thing about him. It's not something major; it's a minor thing. But
well, here's the interesting thing about that, right? This is a couple of conflicting things that I have going on in my brain. Number one, as comedians, we love going into the minutiae of something. So Larry David was talking about how, when he and Jerry Seinfeld were friends in the late 70s, they would go to some, Korean store to pick up something, whatever it was, so some corner store, Korean owned, and they would spend an inordinate, like normal human beings would not do this. They would spend a ton of time making fun of all these, like candies and other like gift wrapped things at the counter. In a Korean store in particular, it's just things that Americans are unfamiliar with, but it looks like something that somebody packed, like a fig bar, with no nutritional information, no packaging, no branding, just looks like somebody wrapped that in their basement. And they would be like, what is that? Who needs that? Who comes in and say, and then they would talk about, each item and go into and I love that. As a comedian, I love going into the minutiae, and I find it gets funnier and funnier the deeper you go. As a human being, I almost rail against details, and it's very frustrating for close friends and people like my wife, who's like, wait, so what did they say then? They said this, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, no, you do know tell me what she said exactly, because that's important to me for this. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I just put it out of my head. It's very strange that I do that. I love it for comedy, and for life, I'm like, everyone just drop it. Just drop everything, everyone. And I don't know why that is.
But I was going to ask you something you said before. You said that Larry David doesn't think that he's being cringeworthy or cringy, or whatever the term
that's
is.
The most hilarious thing to me of all of this. Do we have it wrong? Because this is one of the most hyper aware human beings. He knows exactly what he's doing at all times. He knows what he's doing, even when he doesn't want to do. Right? He's very, very intensely aware of who he is and what's happening around him at all times. There's an article on complex.com with Larry David from 2020. So this was a recent thing where people talk about him. I guess the person who was interviewing him, the reporter, was probably like, I'm going to talk to the master of cringe comedy, and was probably very surprised to hear Larry David say things like, oh, when I hear that there's moments in my show that make people cringe, I was shocked. It never occurred to me. And he said, furthermore, if something made me cringe, I don't think I'd put it in the show. He simply says the reason these things are in the show is that he felt every single thing that's there is he's doing things that are relatably funny. And that's the end of story for Larry David. And furthermore, he goes, I don't think I ever put anything mean in there. You can't tell me I put anything that was mean. Show me one place. And if that's ever been an invitation to argue about minutiae, that was it right there, because I can think of it 100 different times. But he's like, no, that's not mean. When I go and tell this young girl to stop singing, he goes, it's not mean. Also, I would never do that. It's the disconnect between a girl who's a terrible singer and I'm standing there going, I wish I could tell her to stop singing, but I can't. And then, on the show, it's like Larry David goes ahead and does that.
Right. So that's the thing, because there's a bit of wish fulfillment in the character of Larry David, because he's saying the things we wish we could say, and you're like, I can't believe it, but that's what he's saying. It's these relatable things. A recent episode that aired a few weeks ago was about this concept of middling, and it's not middling like what you guys call middling, which is comedians call middling, which is you have a headliner, an opening act, and the person in the middle is middling. He means when you're sitting at a table at a dinner party and you have two people at the head and then three people on the long sides of a rectangular table, the person in the middle is the most important person, because they're the ones that are keeping the conversation going. They're almost the center of attention, and they're talking to the people on the right, the left, across. It's the most important thing. And at this dinner party, they chose two boring people to sit in the middle. And then Larry's like, I'm a good middler. And he made the people switch places in the middle of a dinner party to make the conversation more lively. But the funniest part of that is when you watch it, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so true. And the greatest part is the other people in the show also agreed with him, except for the two people in the middle. And they and when you have that going on where other people are agreeing with him and you're watching it as a viewer and agreeing with him, I just think it means he's hitting on something, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. But it's like, if you're just talking about episodes that you like, and I wanted to bring up one of your favorites, like there's that Carpool Lane episode where he picks up this prostitute so that he can drive in the HOV lane, in the carpool lane. Like, I mean, I don't know. And I have a comedic mind, but I've never thought like it would be interesting to get a prostitute in the car just to save money on carpooling, or just to get into that lane. I love that so much. I mean, I didn't think that was like, oh yes, that's something we all wish we could do. No,
it's more like he's so unbelievable that he kind of does that, right? Like he takes it to the biggest extreme. But yeah, so since we're talking about it, why don't we just talk about some of our favorite Curb moments, Curb episodes? Do you have any kind of that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I have one that comes to mind that cannot be spoken about on this podcast. Since you said S word, I certainly can't talk about the dialogue that Crazy Eyes Killer. This is Wanda Sykes gets engaged to this rapper named Crazy Eyes, and he starts telling Larry David he loves cheating on his fiance, and eventually Larry blurts it out, and then, there's this like gangster rapper who's basically out to kill Larry. And it's fantastic. It's like, really, I love that whole thing. And I don't feel like I've seen enough of if you want to know who Chris Williams is, if you ever seen Dodgeball, He was this black guy in Dodgeball. He has like beautiful, beautiful green-gray eyes. I just thought it was like a great role for him. And to watch Larry kind of, at one point, like he's like sort of color blind. He doesn't see color, but at the same time, he points out obvious things that have to do with race. And it's, I don't know. It's great. That is season 3. So I've watched all of season 1, 2, and 3, and then little bits of 4 and 5 and 6 here and there. But I love those episodes. I also loved when Leon Black came into the mix. And Leon Black is played by J.B. Smoove, who's a comedian and actor. And J.B. Smoove, I actually got to witness J.B. Smoove playing Leon Black outside of the show, which I think is, he probably took that cue from Larry David himself, who is like always the Larry David. But I was asked once at Just for Laughs one year, and I knew one of the programmers well. He's like, hey, man, can I ask you to do something on stage at Just for Laughs? I was like, what? Am I going to be performing? Oh, my God, this is unbelievable. He's like, no, that is not what's happening. This is about 6-7 years ago. He said, J.B. Smoove is doing a live late night talk show format, and it's late night with Leon Black. And he's going to have guests on, and he wants to have a chef there on stage, and and he wants to have a hot tub there. So he had like a hot tub on the stage. And I was a chef in the corner, and he'd be like, yo, man, make me some croissants. Make me some croissants, put some strawberries in them croissants, and then pour some champagne over it. And I was just like, you want me to pour champagne on the croissant? He goes, yeah. And then they're eating like croissants with strawberries and champagne poured into this, croissant, into a hole in the croissant. Just like ridiculous. This is Late Night with Leon Black, but I was the chef that did that. So I got to watch that up close. And then after that, I revisited some Leon Black episodes, and I liked it. I remember at the time, it felt a little bit improv-y when I watched it. But then as I went back and looked at it, I was like, oh yeah, there's genius here in terms of rhythm and pacing and story. This is really, really well done.
Yeah, I think J.B. Smoove, he understands the character of Leon Black so well, and that's why he's able to respond like, J.B. Smoove doesn't sound like that in real life, right? But the way he plays Leon. And of course, there's a whole season where his extended family gets displaced from Hurricane Katrina, and Black family moves in, like the literal Black family. So I love that episode. And for me, it's moments, right? There are some episodes. The Palestinian chicken from season 8 is, Larry David feeling this conflict that he's going to this restaurant that makes amazing chicken, but they're anti-Israel, and he has to reconcile that, in the way that he would. There's that. There's an episode in season 5 where Richard Lewis needs a kidney, and Larry David's supposed to be the donor. And then Larry David finds out he was he's not Jewish. He's Christian. And it's really funny, because then when he realizes he's Christian, he totally changes the way he acts. He doesn't complain about anything. He's like a good Samaritan, and then he finds out, no, actually that was wrong. He is Jewish. And then he goes back to his own ways, and then it seemed like actually that was going to be the end of the series, because it's called The End. And he goes to heaven, and he ends up getting into an argument with an angel in heaven, and went over some minutia as well. So it seemed like that was going to be the end, but then it's gone on for like 5 more seasons after that.
That Palestinian chicken episode, that episode has been called actually a brilliant examination of Israel-Palestine, that the conflict, because not only is he, interested in that chicken, he's also dating a woman who he's getting turned on by her saying like deeply grotesque anti-Semitic things to him in bed. It's like a real examination. He's like, I'm an occupier in bed. It's unbelievable. What's is super, I don't know if everybody knows this. I think it's common knowledge, but that improv thing that you alluded to, it's not a fully written script. And furthermore, when they started, I love Ted Danson talking about this. Ted Danson's been a recurring character. He was there in the first season. And Ted was talking about how, Larry would just call you and be like, hey, are you free to come by? Are you free to come by tomorrow? Like, this is not how the acting world works. Agents are involved. There's booking. There's call sheets. There's like many different factors that go into. And Ted Danson was like, this was like guerrilla TV making, you know? Larry goes, are you free tomorrow? You come by. There's no trailer, you know, just wear whatever. You just, wait in your car and we'll call you when we need you to come on set. Like, ridiculous. Ted Danson, this man was a legend at that time. He'd done Sam Malone on Cheers. He was a Becker. And you're having Ted Danson come in. Now, granted, some people say that Curb resurrected Ted Danson's career and turned him into this, I don't know. I'm not sure about that either. He was always a legend in my mind for years. But there were years where we didn't see too much of Ted Danson. But the point being that this was like, just wear whatever you want. That's crazy. There's no wardrobe department. It's really like the roots of this show are really something pretty special. But that's who Larry David is. People are like, yeah, whatever it takes, I'll work with Larry David. Sure. I'm not going to be calling my agent and being like, this is ridiculous. We can't have this happen. I deserve more. It's just calling his friends to sort of goof around and improv a little bit.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned those connections to Sacha Baron Cohen, because Larry Charles was one of the big directors for Curb, and then he directed Borat as well, right? So it's the first movie. So there's all these kind of connections. So for me, the other kind of main plot lines I love is the most recent season 10 from last year or a couple of years ago. It's where he creates a coffee shop beside a coffee shop that kind of wronged him, called Latte Larry. So he creates his own coffee shop just to get back at the person. So it's the concept of a spite store. And then I guess that takes off, and then lots of other people have spite stores. In that same season, John Hamm appears as himself because he has to play a Larry David type character in a TV show or a movie or something like that. So he follows Larry David around and tries to act like a jerk like Larry David. It's so good. But my favorite season is season 7.
Okay. I've heard good things.
People know that I'm a huge Seinfeld fan, and so Seinfeld never has done a reunion, and they probably won't ever do a reunion. But this is the closest, because the plot line of all of season 7 is that Larry David is trying to get everybody back together for a Seinfeld reunion. So all the main actors come back as if they're doing it, and they do a table read and stuff like that, and it's Larry David causing all these problems as Larry David in getting this Seinfeld reunion done. So to me, that's the peak, because it's an amazing season of Curb, and you get that Seinfeld reunion that everybody wants, but not in the way you think. It's almost in a perfect way, because it's a Larry David kind of way, and he sabotages everything.
And season 7 is when he got beat up, I think, twice by Rosie O'Donnell. Right, there's that Denise handicapped episode as well as season 7. There's I've seen more of season 7 than I thought I have, actually, and I really liked the multiple appearances on Curb by Bob Einstein. Now, I don't know, people may not know Bob Einstein, but you will know his various characters. And as a kid, I used to watch a show called Bizarre with John Biner, and Super Dave would be, it was all the funny. He was like this terrible stuntman who would always fail a stunt. And John Biner, they would do a stunt and he would get completely squished by something falls on him, and all you see is a helmet lying on 2 feet. And he'd be like, Super Dave, are you okay? And he's just talking to a helmet on a pair of shoes. And he'd be like, my is in my me. How do you think I'm doing, John, you idiot? And I just remember as a kid being like, this is so funny. It's so ridiculously funny. But I was a big fan of that guy. And, so at some level, you're like, oh, I wonder whatever happened to that guy. And then you saw him again. And then he comes back as Marty Funkhauser and Curb Your Enthusiasm. And it was fantastic. I love that guy. And if you think he looks like Albert Brooks, by the way, he's his older brother. He's the older brother. He was the older brother. He passed away. Yeah. I knew that immediately.
Yeah, so he passed away a couple of years ago. Yeah, it's sad, and of course Vince Vaughn plays his nephew now on Curb, so Vince Vaughn is kind of carrying on the Funkhauser tradition. So it's funny, we have Larry David, who's 74 now, still making hilarious television, and of course all of his compatriots on the show, Richard Lewis, etc., all kind of getting older, but still hilarious and still kind of these kings of cringe comedy. Which I guess maybe this getting older ties us into andropause or male menopause.
Okay, so I've heard you say both andropause and I've heard you say male menopause. I'm not as familiar with the term andropause, although it's probably come across the radar. I just haven't paid as much attention. But male menopause definitely catches your eye and it catches your ear when you hear it as a man. And my first thoughts are obviously, okay, is it a real thing or is it something pharmaceutical industry is trying to coin so that they can make some money off of it? So that's the first question I want to ask is it a thing? Is male menopause something that exists?
Yeah, and as often, like both your statements are right. It is a thing, but it's also something that drug companies are trying to get people's attention about to make money. And I even use the term male menopause in our transition a few minutes ago. But even that is it's not really correct, and I think people don't like to use that term because menopause. We've talked about. We had the amazing Jen Gunter on our show talking about menopause. Menopause is for women, ovulation ends, their hormone production changes over a relatively short period of time of several years. But in men, what we're talking about is the gradual decrease in testosterone production and some other hormones over time. And so it's A, slower, and B, the consequences aren't really clear. And so andropause is kind of used, by the lay press at this kind of male menopause term, but really it's called late onset hypogonadism. So that's the medical term.
I recognize a word. Gonads. I know what those are. So hyper would be like overactive gonads. Testicles. Hypo would be underactive. Hence but thereby leading to the idea of, less testosterone production, right? We were talking about steroids in our last episode and HGH. Your testicles shrink, you were saying, because you don't need to produce as much testosterone. Is that right? Because you're getting it injected in your body or added.
It's not necessarily that they shrink, but the testosterone does go down over time, but it's a very slow decrease. So after age 40, testosterone levels decrease at about 1% a year. But even still, most men will still have testosterone levels in the normal range, even with that decrease. And only 10 to 25%, if you do the test properly, will have levels that are considered to go low.
What do you mean only? 10 to 25% is huge. 1 in 4 men are having, low testosterone. I'm sure it's an issue.
I guess so, but 75% don't.
Oh, that's a good way. Look at you, cup half full. For the first time in your life. No, you've done that before. I think I come at this from an interesting perspective because I started losing my hair in my early 20s, and everybody was like, it just means you have, overactive testosterone. And I was like, yeah, I'll take my hair back and lose my testosterone if it's really, if it's a choice. But like somebody like me, or Larry David, if we refer back to people who are balding from an early age, that is testosterone, correct?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
But are we still at risk 30 years later? Like, is my hair going to grow back? Is what I'm asking you. My hair's never going to grow back. Right?
It's not. It's not going to grow back. But you, Larry David, or anyone, it doesn't really matter what your testosterone levels were before. You're still at risk of this age-related decline.
Okay.
Right?
So I'm not in the clear because I'm like, I was told.
Necessarily, no.
I have indication right on my own skull that I have high testosterone. Those days have passed. That happened at one point, and now there will never be any more hair, but there still could be testosterone issues. Okay, all right. So what does it look like? What is low testosterone? How does it manifest itself in a male body?
Yeah, so when So the most specific kind of things that you could see is reduced sexual desire and activity, decreased spontaneous or morning erections.
Okay, should I go through a checklist with you and go no, yes, as you go through a check? Maybe we won't do that, but all right. So sexual desire, erection.
Yeah, and infertility. Those are kind of a lot of the main things that people look at. You can also have hot flushes or sweating.
Oh, okay. So that's very similar to the menopause.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So those are kind of the main ones. And if you look at, we'll link to some of these articles which talk about the very specific signs and symptoms. So you can have small testes. That's usually in young people who have testosterone deficiency, and that could be due to other kind of medical or genetic reasons. But we said decreased libido, the erections. You could have breast discomfort. You could have gynecomastia, which we talked about, I think, on our previous episodes. That's breast development in a man. We talked about that in the steroid episode. And infertility, right? Infertility is a big thing. So if you have, men who are under age 40 but who've been trying to have children and they can't, and maybe they have a low sperm count when that's checked by their fertility doctors, that could be the reason why.
Any connection with vasectomies?
No.
Where you made yourself, infertile, so to speak.
It's because the vasectomy is just kind of like cutting off this tube essentially, but the production of sperm is still there. And you can also have height loss and like fractures in your spine or things like that, and that's also sometimes a thing. So those are suggestive of testosterone deficiency, but there's a lot of other non-specific symptoms. And this is where I think you're going to see a problem come in. So the non-specific symptoms are decreased energy and motivation and confidence, low mood, poor concentration, increased sleepiness, reduced muscle bulk, and increased body fat.
Okay, so like every man over 55, basically?
Right.
I mean, these are confidence necessarily. Some men get more and more confident as they get older, but a lot of those things just seem like across the board things. I'm sleepy right now. And it's first thing in the morning. Yeah. What the heck?
I'm tired constantly. And so there's that fatigue, and maybe that fatigue is due to something else, like sleep apnea or something like that. Maybe these things are correlated differently. So, I'm depressed. I'm not saying I am, but pretend I'm a person. Pretend I'm Joe Average.
Pretend you're a person is hilarious. You're a robot.
Well,
yes,
some people.
For the sake of pretending, just for this one episode, you're a person. Go on.
And say I'm depressed, so that I'm not exercising as much, and of course body fat is increasing, and then maybe I get sleep apnea because my BMI is increasing. So there's many reasons that this could happen. You don't have to all pin it on low testosterone. So that's where things become a bit complicated, because now you're having some very vague, non-specific symptoms that people are trying to tie in to low testosterone. The other stuff, especially with regards to sexual desire, sexual function, libido, that's a bit different. That's a bit more concrete. These other ones are a bit more vague. Right?
So, I mean, with the vague symptoms, people should probably still go get tested because there might be other things happening. But with those larger main symptoms, as you were saying, that libido, erection, testicular shrinkage, that's when people should probably get tested for low testosterone specifically.
Right. I 100% agree with what you said. See?
I was asking a question.
I know, but you're slowly becoming a doctor, so that's good. It would just take...
Not a real doctor.
It would just take 80 years of this podcast. So,
yes, perfect.
So... I agree. If you're having those non-specific symptoms, you better get those checked out, because again, it could be many things that are going on. But then your specific question was, but if you're having some of these more specific symptoms, should you get tested for testosterone deficiency? Which is a good question, and you should. But again, just like everything in medicine, it seems there's some complications with this. You cannot just go and just get a testosterone level done.
It's not a blood test, by the way, right?
It is a blood test. It is a blood test.
It is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there are some caveats to this. And again, if it's being ordered by someone who doesn't know these caveats, then it becomes different. So certain things can influence your testosterone levels. So one is eating. That can do it. Other diseases can also influence your testosterone level. So when you get a testosterone level done, you need to do it first thing in the morning. because it fluctuates a lot based on time of day. So it has to be first thing in the morning, has to be fasting. Okay. And the other thing that's been shown by a lot of these endocrinology experts is that just one sample isn't good enough. You need to do it at least 2 times. And if you have it confirmed low on 2 occasions, that would be considered testosterone deficiency. But when we do a blood test, you may have seen this if you ever had a blood test done, Ali, we have these normal values, right? We know the normal age ranges based on someone's age, maybe gender, height, etc. And then we can tell you this is the normal range. But there's essentially a lot of unqualified labs that do testosterone testing, especially in the US. So you have to make sure it gets tested by a accurate lab who has accurate normal values. So they know in their lab they've tested what the normal range is and what's outside the normal range. Because again, that can give you false readings. So there's a lot of things to kind of think about in this. But if you do all those steps, or your doctor does all those steps, then you could then be labeled as having hypogonadism or testosterone deficiency.
How do you treat it then? I guess the test is a carefully administered blood test more than once from a accredited clinic or a reputable clinic. Once you find out that you have it, what's the next step?
So, and this is where you may have seen this. So I find these types of commercials are often on Sunday morning and afternoon. The news shows, right? They know who's watching news shows on a weekend.
The most depressed. Catering to the most depressed people.
Yeah, usually men, probably over 55, are watching these things. And so there's been a lot of direct-to-consumer marketing, right, for these types of testosterone replacements. And there's different ones. One of the problems is you can't just take it by mouth. Usually there are some newer formulations that are coming that you can take by mouth. But the problem...
Which orifice do you take it in?
The problem is it gets metabolized through the liver when you take it by mouth, and that can cause liver toxicity. There's some new oral ones that you take, which are metabolized. It's actually absorbed through your lymphatic system, like your lymph nodes, which is a very interesting way for a drug to be absorbed. But that's a bit different, so that might bypass that. But there's different ways. There's gel. You can rub this gel on your body.
Body anywhere?
Certain places. Usually it's the skin of your upper arm or shoulder or the front and inner thigh.
Thought you were going to say right on the gonads, but there's no... the human body is a marvel. It continues to surprise me relentlessly. Okay, so on your skin...
Injections, there's a patch that you can apply. There's even one that you can put in your cheek and it gets absorbed, kind of like chewing tobacco.
Like, I was going to say like a nitrolingual.
That's maybe a better example, since that's actually a medicine.
Chewing tobacco, doc? Yeah, okay.
There's a nasal gel that you can be pumped in the nostrils, and there's even implantable pellets. So imagine putting a Pez dispenser, and then you take the little Pez pellet, go underneath your skin, and then it gets absorbed over time. So there are some complications with regards to the treatment, but these are the ways that you'd do it, and then you can follow people's testosterone levels over time.
You don't want to tell us about the complications and the side effects for the treatment? You just want to leave that vague?
Listen, man, there's always potential complications, and this is why, again, you don't want to just start doing this unless you've proven that you have testosterone deficiency. The biggest concern is that testosterone can worsen prostate disease. So can worsen prostate cancer or something else called benign prostatic hypertrophy.
Wait, sorry. Let me just make sure I understand clearly. Having low testosterone naturally does not affect your prostate. It's the treatment specifically.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
And so you got to be careful, right? You don't want to worsen prostate disease. So obviously you need to be screened for that before you start the therapy, and then afterwards you need to be monitored for prostate disease. And so that's one thing to worry about. There's also some concerns that it can actually cause what's called polycythemia, which is increase your red blood cell production. Actually makes your blood thicker, is one way of thinking about it. There are some reports that it may increase your risk for cardiac disease or sleep apnea. Again, I'm not sure that that's been proven. Again, people can correct me if I'm wrong. If there's any endocrinologists or experts in andropause or male hypogonadism listening, that definitely let me know if I'm wrong about that. For my reading, that's not completely.
I don't know. I think, as you talk about treatment, and if anybody is in need of this treatment, I apologize for being, jokey about it. That's just what I do. But look, 50 is in my front mirror, front mirror, my front windshield. I'm getting older and I'm subject to all of this as well. But I think, like so many things, especially with the fragility of the male ego being such a real thing, I think there may be a lot of people who are reluctant to go and get this treatment or explore it, because then you have it on paper. You see the words low testosterone, and what makes you a man. This is why I brought up the fact that I was balding, and everybody would say, don't worry, more testosterone. And it was meant to be consolation. It was meant to be like, hey, don't worry. It just means you're more of a man. Now, when you're balding, that does nothing for you. But that's the what do you want to call it? It's the conventional wisdom. That's the party line. You're a man, testosterone. And so therefore, by that logic, what so many men have, when your testosterone is shrinking or depleted in some way, there are many, many men clearly who would feel like, I'm not a man anymore.
That's
I feel like half a man. So
yeah.
Do you have psychologists involved in stuff like this?
Yeah. And I never thought about that. That's probably a really good point. And I wonder if some of these clinics that look into this do have supports like that. It's a really good point. I think it's more the opposite though. I think as much as that might be embarrassing for somebody, I think what I get worried about is a lot of these non-specific symptoms, low mood, depression, no motivation, no libido. As we talked about, those can be just depression. And I wonder, I would challenge you, Ali, maybe talking about depression is less socially acceptable than talking about low testosterone. Low testosterone. Oh yeah, I got low testosterone. I'm going to take that, because probably what will happen when you take the testosterone, in addition to improving a lot of those symptoms of libido and motivation and things like that, you probably will lose some body fat and put on some muscle. So, maybe that's something that people are interested in. And
it has a quicker fix than depression does, right? Depression involves truly working on yourself and going deep into the recesses of your mind sometimes. To really
and maybe taking
happening.
medication for depression, which again has a stigma attached to it. So yeah, I wonder. So that I would kind of throw that back at you, and I wonder if this would be more accepting to people. But listen, our listeners should let us know if people have thought about this, if they're dealing with this. Very curious to know.
And yeah, if you write to us and you'd like to speak anonymously, Asif knows a little bit about that. You have a code of ethics you operate by, right, Asif? No? Yes? Maybe? So yeah, anything you want to share with us, we've enjoyed that quite a bit, reading listener emails and also suggestions that come up. That's our show for today. I hope two things came out of this show at the very least. Number one, you're willing to explore the world of Larry David and Curb Your Enthusiasm a little bit more if you haven't already. And number two, if testosterone and the presence of it in your body as a man is an issue, I hope this inspired you to maybe, look into it, get tested, get help if you need it, and not ignore it, because men are good at that. I learned that from my father, right? It's the equivalent of like, do you hear that noise from the engine of the car? Sure do. Let's turn up the radio.
Right,
and we do that, but with our bodies. We do that with our own bodies. Many men do, and if you don't, you have my respect, and I hold you in high admiration. But these are things that you should definitely get a hold of quickly before they get away from you.
So definitely we encourage people, if you're having those symptoms, talk to your doctor. As we said, maybe it is low testosterone, maybe it's not. So you need to balance those things out. But remember, that although I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor. So I'm not giving you medical advice. And really, the issues we talk about are for your interest and information only. So please consult your medical professionals for actual medical advice. Remember, reach out to us. We're very curious to see what people think about this episode. Do you like Curb Your Enthusiasm? Do you hate it because of the cringiness of it? And what about this idea of low testosterone and andropause? Let us know. Dr. V Comedian, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. drvcomedian@gmail.com is our email address. Let us know what you think. That's it for today.
Thank you, everybody. And any reviews, positive, I shouldn't say any reviews. If you'd like to leave us, a 5-star review, we would very much appreciate that. As you know, that helps the algorithms that help people listen to our show and see our show and come across our show. We'd love that. And any feedback is always welcome. That is it. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.